Hi, my name is David Blatner. Welcome to Ask MOGO, the all-request how-to podcast where professionals answer your design and application questions. Today's question comes from Cass, who says, when I applied a drop shadow to one image, all the graphics on the page got lighter. What could be going on? Well, Cass, this has been the subject of intense debate over at InDesignSecrets.com as well. And it turns out that it has to do with the transparency flattening. Let me show you. I'll switch over to InDesign here, and here we have obviously a very basic layout here. I just wanted to show you a layout with a couple grayscale images and a color image as well. And I can see very easily, I can demonstrate this very easily. If I select this object up here, just a little black box, doesn't matter what it is, I threw a black box up here, and if I go to the Effects panel, or that's the Transparency panel in CS2, and if I change anything in the Effects panel, the opacity, the blending mode, add a drop shadow, any of the transparency effects, if I change anything in here, then look what happens to all the grayscale images. For example, I'll set this to multiply. Did you see that? Immediately, everything got a little bit lighter up here. The color image didn't change very much, but the grayscale images is quite perceptible. I'll turn it off again. You see that change? Now, the transparency flattener space, you can see here under the edit menu, the transparency blend space, sorry. The transparency blend space lives under the edit menu, and you can choose either RGB or CMYK. And if your final output is to a press, then of course you should be using CMYK. If your final output is to screen, like an on-screen PDF, then choose PDF. Or if you're printing to like an inkjet printer, if that's your final output, or maybe even a laser printer, then you might want to be choosing RGB, because especially inkjet printers should typically be treated as RGB devices, even though they use CMYK inks. They're just sort of set up that way. So in this case, I'm going to be printing to CMYK, so I'll leave it set to CMYK, but you can see that any kind of effect does change the visual representation of that information. It does not change how it prints, just how it looks on screen. The reason is because there's flattening on that page. Here, if we look at the Pages panel, there's no transparency. Now let's swap back here, turn on the transparency for this one object, and now we can see that there is a little transparency icon here, that little checkerboard, and that tells us that there is transparency on this spread, and so the whole page gets sort of pushed into the transparency blend space. Now there's another way to push it into the transparency blend space, just so that things look a little bit better. Let me turn the transparency off here, and I'm going to go to the View menu and turn on Overprint Preview. And Overprint Preview isn't really Overprint Preview only. It's basically make everything a little bit closer to what it's really going to look like in the final output. And so that's why when you turn Overprint Preview on, you actually get that same effect. Even though there's no transparency on the page here, see the no transparency icon, there's no transparency on the page here, but we still get the same effect. That's why it's often a good idea to work with Overprint Preview turned on if you can. And when I say if you can, it basically has to do with how fast your machine is. On any reasonably fast machine these days, any kind of new machine, you probably can work with Overprint Preview turned on, and you'll be happier because it's a more accurate. It's still not a perfect output, but it's a more accurate preview of what you're going to get. On an old slow machine, you may have to turn it off, but then you suffer not having exactly the best quality output. So that's what that's about. That's why your images are changing. It's just trying to make it a little bit more accurate by pushing it through the transparency blend space, which you can also get by going into Overprint Preview mode.